Hello and welcome to Speaking Out on Financial Abuse. Stories of survival and hope after financial abuse in a marriage or romantic partnership. I'm your host, Lori G. And today my guest is Windi, a survivor of financial and domestic abuse, who is also blazing a trail to bring more gun violence prevention through her legislative advocacy and her public speaking events. Windi is going to tell us her story of surviving an abusive partnership and how she became a fierce advocate in helping other victims of domestic abuse and gun violence as well. Windi, welcome to the program.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
So, where in the world are you, and where are you originally from?
I am actually located in Rancho Cucamonga, California, which is Southern California, 42 miles from Los Angeles, in this county of San Bernadino, which has 24 cities. And I was originally born in Los Angeles, California, Daniel Freeman Hospital. And most of my life, I was raised in Los Angeles County until 1992. That's when we moved to San Bernardino County. And I love it. I traveled outside of California doing outreach and came right back because this is my home.
Yeah, well, I can appreciate the weather out there for sure. What is your professional background, or what do you do for a living?
My professional background, I work for behavioral health. I work for CDC, which is public health. I've been an executive administrator for a major electrical utility company out here. And I have been in the mortgage real estate industry for over 8 years. I currently started advocating 7 years ago on behalf of gun violence victims when my son was a victim of a homicide. And I found there were a lack of resources for victims. And that's where I'm at today. I use all my past experiences in order to advocate for others on behalf of reducing gun violence.
And it's really an honor to have someone with your passion and commitment on this show. And I definitely want to talk more about your advocacy for gun violence on the behalf of your late son. But let's turn back the hands of time. What was money like growing up in your own household? And what was your childhood like?
My childhood was, I would say, typical, normal. I had a hairdresser. We had a babysitter. My mother worked days. My father worked night. I was in ballet, etiquette classes, church 4 to 5 days a week, soccer, ballet, you name it. We were the typical middle-class family, never lived in an apartment. My mother was treated like a queen. Father worked 2 to 3 jobs, keep score for his bowling league. We had a typical, normal, middle-class family.
What did your dad do?
He worked for aerospace, Boeing.
So you grew up in, sounds like, a pretty stable environment with your parents, and that you were very active in your commitment to your church and to your church community. Where did you meet your former partner that we're going to talk about today? And how old were you when you met him?
I met him when I was 19, about to turn 20, and I was actually on the freeway with my friend, and we were laughing because he was in the carpool lane by himself. He looked over, and it was just playful gestures, and he asked for my phone number, and we wound up exchanging phone numbers. And
on the freeway?
Actually, we pulled off the way. He followed me, he flagged me and told me to pull off the side of the freeway. I was in a sports car, he was in a sports car. It was just kind of, it was just funny though, because me and my girlfriend, we were sitting there and she wanted to go visit her boyfriend. It was my day off of work and we were just on the freeway. Both of our sunroofs were open and just really nice day. I remember that day. But yes, he asked me to get off the freeway, and first time I've ever done anything like that. And we exchanged phone numbers.
And he called you?
Yes, and he called me, and when he called me, he asked me out on a date. He just kind of mentioned to me he was looking for a long-term partner. He was looking to get married, and that he just liked the fact that I worked and pretty much just, minded my own business and wasn't out here, because he was 7 years older than me.
Okay. I was going to ask you what your age difference was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was 7 years older than me. So the fact that I was a homebody and had morals, I'll tell you that later. I mean, going into the story, I see why he found that I was amazing to him in his eyes, because any other time, I don't think he would have been able to entertain someone long enough to get their phone number. Now that I think about it, that wasn't in the streets, as I want to say.
What was his background? What was his family like?
His family, he had a tight-knit family. He was the baby in his family, so he was spoiled. And to find out, his father wasn't around much, I remember. And his mother was a hardworking woman who worked for the hospital. She was a top administrator at the hospital. In addition to that, she was a seamstress, so they had a family business where they put together weddings, sewn gowns, and things like that. Family was CPA. He was actually ex-military. He was a veteran, Desert Storm veteran, and he had these hopes and these dreams of opening up a business. And I wanted to support him on his dreams to try to make sure that we just take care of each other in that aspect where we didn't have to worry about where we were going. That moment, maybe things weren't perfect, but I just knew that things can get better. And that's what we were looking towards, was the future.
What kind of business did he want to start?
He wanted to start a business, he said, to where he wanted to do rehabbing. He wanted to get into real estate. As a matter of fact, he did get into real estate a little bit, but it was too much for him. And it just didn't turn out very well, because when you have too many skeletons in your closet and it comes back to haunt you, like you just feel like you're running. And that's what he did with me. He was running from things when he met me, and I didn't realize it at the time. But yeah, he had too many unfinished tasks that he had to take care of before he moved forward. And he wasn't honest with me about taking care of those things, because we would have taken care of them. So
How long did you date before you became engaged?
we dated about 3 months before.
Okay.
Before he asked me to marry him. And I thought he would have a moral conscience, is what I thought.
Did he go to your church, or did he go to church, since that was something that was part of your almost daily routine?
He actually went to church with me, but he told me a story about when he was active duty. And he said that prior to that, that he did not really believe in God, but he started believing in God after bombs were flying over his head. So I always felt that I didn't want to push him to have a better relationship. I always thought that God would just continue to show him and work in his life to where he let him know that he was active and he was always there. But he did encourage me, and he supported me taking the kids to church. Though he didn't attend church as many days of the week that I did, that he always supported the kids and what they did in the church, and supported me as well. I find it strange now that I think back. But
I mean, ultimately, like when you had kids.
Yeah. I mean, now that I look back, it was just, like I said, it was kind of strange to see how he supported us, giving us tithing money, giving us money for all different type of events, because my kids were extremely active, and so was I. And he didn't take that away from us, but I guess that was his that was his power.
Yeah.
And that was his power with us, was making sure that we got to church so we could forgive him or something, maybe.
Well, before you started having kids, were there any warning shots about the marriage itself? It sounds like when you got married, you had a few reservations about maybe some behavioral issues.
There was some behavioral issues, but I thought they were temporary because he hadn't been treated as of yet.
For PTSD? Was that the issue?
Right.
Okay.
And so he would go to the doctor, and then he would stop. And then he would go to the doctor, he'd be okay, then he would stop. When I went and contacted the VA, it was a matter of, well, the veteran has to be willing. And it's like, what do you mean willing? He's wearing me out over here, and the kids, like, what do you mean? I prevented him from going to jail a couple of times in hopes that he would just go get treatment on his own, because I always felt that putting someone who served for this country behind bars was not the way for them to be rehabilitated. So I protected him, but the laws didn't really protect me while I was protecting him. And then it was ultimately up to the VA for the veteran to access the services that him and his family were eligible for. And he was not doing that.
So there were definite issues with PTSD and the need for treatment and resources before you started having children. But then you did have how many kids together?
He and I had 2 kids. When I met him, I was previously engaged, and my fiance wound up in a car accident. And I was with him since I came out of high school, and he wound up going into the military, but he wound up in a car accident while he was on deployment and wound up waking up with half a brain.
Oh, no.
Right. So that left me with 2 kids, and here it is.
So you came into this marriage with 2 children from a prior relationship that was intended to become another marriage. And then you had 2 children. So you have 4 kids.
Yes, I had a daughter for him, and I had another son. I had a son for him. When he asked me to marry him, he told me he didn't have any children, that he always wanted a child, that he would be a good father because he was good to my sons that I had. But I didn't know he was a liar. He lied.
Was the start of a, let's say, escalation of the problems in your relationship with regards to how he was behaving, how money was being managed, how much money was even coming in and out? Were these starting to escalate after you had both kids and the kids were starting to get older? Or was this already a major issue by the time you had children?
I always held down positions where it was a lot of responsibility and multitasking and always being on your feet and being very effective communicator. That was I. So I always had a lot of responsibility in any position that I would hold on any job. So I got paid very well.
And was he bringing in any income?
Yes, he was bringing in income, but he was unstable, meaning that he would be on a job for so long and then he would actually, for some strange reason, lose that position or something would happen or it would just abruptly end. And so with that being said, I knew that I had to be the primary breadwinner because in between his inconsistencies, I knew that there was things that he probably wasn't telling me. There was things that were going on in my own household that I saw that was questionable.
What did you start finding out?
Actually, it was just a combination of things that had happened. It was like one day I just woke up and it was almost like my life flashed before my eyes. There was a child that the child support order that he had arranged behind my back. It froze our account after I went out and got this brand new house. It just completely froze our account and I didn't know anything about it. I called him and he was out of town looking at another property because they were going to rehab these properties into apartment at that time. They had a really big contract. So he was out of town and everything was frozen. I couldn't get anything out the bank. He told me, don't worry about it. And me being a good wife and mate, I didn't call. I didn't ask any questions. I just let him come into town and deal with this. He came into town. There was a manila envelope that was on the seat. Well, he wasn't talking to me or anything. I picked him up from the airport, still like no conversation. I got dressed all nice and sexy and looking very nice with my jeans on and my nice blouse. He never said anything to me. So anyhow, I looked in the envelope. I went to the store, came out, looked at the envelope and turned around and said, well, this is the third time I'm seeing it. So guess what? I'm going to open it now. And I opened up the envelope and it was child support papers that I hadn't even known about. And you're talking about so many years after. And I just felt really foolish because the whole time he had this child that I did not know about. Looking at the date, the child was conceived around the same time that my daughter was born, which is the first child I gave him because he said he didn't have any children.
And this was during your marriage. So this child was born during your marriage.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it was just a combination of things that I had to think about at that point. And he wound up never contacting the child or being a part of the child's life. I heard this from the stepfather and I confronted him and asked him, why wasn't that child a part of our life? Because according to the information that was disclosed to me, the child had a hardship. We had a good life. Why would you deprive that child out of getting to know his sisters and brothers because of what you did? And that wasn't right to punish the child. And that's when I knew that we were done because there was already a woman that was in the scene during the time that I was pregnant. This woman that he had a child with, I didn't know anything about the child, but there was another woman.
Oh, this is another person.
Yes.
Okay.
That he was in a relationship with. And I didn't know this, but apparently she had gotten in trouble for something. And he left her and asked me to marry him while she was doing time. I just felt like that was it. And that's when I knew it was it. When he deprived that child out of a better life. And we made pretty good money. There's nothing I would have shared with that child. There's nothing that child would have wanted for because it was his child. And I just didn't like the fact that he did that. I couldn't. That's when I knew that we were done, pretty much.
When you came out of your divorce, did he end up paying child support to all these kids, your kids, as well as this other child? Or did he just basically deadbeat everybody?
Yeah, he deadbeat everyone. Actually, he did not receive his service-connected benefits until 2013 or 14. So we had been divorced for quite some time by then. But I had an issue with my divorce decree because it was forged.
What do you it was forged?
The name was spelled wrong. Somebody spelled my name wrong.
So does that mean you're still married?
When I contacted the courts to ask them about that, they wind up just telling me at that time that I had to come into the court. But he found out that I was trying to address it. So, and I didn't have anything new as far as being able to put an active restraining order on him, other than the fact that he told me, I will, you know what, you. And they said that wasn't enough because I needed it in a text message. So here it is. It's almost like I got to put myself back into danger in order for them to understand that he forged my signature. I need to address this. So I did not address it because I knew that sometimes victims put themselves in more danger unless they have something new to bring up. And I regret that to this day, because when I found the power and the strength, what had taken place was that they told me my statute of limitations had exceeded. He had benefits that he received for my children and I, because we were not on welfare or anything, that he got all the back pay for my kids, for 2 of my kids, and he never gave us $1.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So on the divorce decree, when we originally went to court, I just told the judge I wanted my last name back because he was ruining my credit. There was a lot of things that he had control over. It was almost like I couldn't do anything with my body as far as getting my tubes tight or anything. On 2 separate occasions with both of my kids, and they told me that my husband had to consent, that it wasn't enough time because I had delivered at a different hospital, and all of a sudden the paper is void because he's saying no. I just really wanted my life back, and it just seems like the only way that I can have my life back is to get my last name back.
That was the highlight of the film, was it What's Love Got to Do with It, where Tina Turner went into her divorce and decided at the last minute to let go of all royalties, all possessions, but the only thing she took back was her name.
Yep, it happens, because sometimes you just know you got to walk things back somewhere. You got to walk things back where they went wrong, and that's accountability. And it's saying, you know what, I'm going to be accountable for making this decision. I'm going to be accountable for doing all these things. I need to learn how to let go and just be able to pick up where I left off, just start screening people, assessing people a little better. I don't know what it is that I didn't learn, but I do know now. So I'm going to walk it back and start from there. And at least getting your name back, that is the ultimate empowerment, I think. For me, that was when I said, okay, I'm back. You know, I'm no longer his, and I can take my power back. He can no longer have power over me. He no longer has control. And so that's definitely, I understood Angela Bassett and What's Love Got to Do with This, because it didn't matter. All the cars, everything, it just didn't amount to anything. If as a mother, you're almost failing your kids, you don't even have enough energy to even watch your kids. What is it even worth? It's not worth anything.
Yeah, your freedom is worth so much more. And I can so relate in changing your name back to the name you grew up with. What resources did you use or reach out to either during your divorce or after your divorce?
During my divorce, it was really messy because he did things like kick my front door down, turned the lights off in the house because the electricity was in his name. I could have easily turned it on in my name, but he didn't even tell me. He didn't say anything. On a Friday, it's after 6:00 and I'm walking in the house with the kids and the lights are off, with no warning. He stole my car one time. And the thing about it is I was at a car lot and I was just like, okay, well, my car's gone. Someone stole my car. I had no idea that he had anything to do with this. And I'm on my lunch break. I borrowed a vehicle from a family member, told them, give me a week. I make pretty good money. I'll just go ahead and slap some money down on another car and let the insurance company do whatever. Anyhow, that week I was at a car dealership up the street from my job. I turned around and saw my car drive by like a street. And the car salesman, we both looked at each other and I said, that was my car. So I drive over there and it was his friend. He put his friend up to stealing my car because I followed him. I went up the street. They got stopped at a light. I followed him and the friend was so upset. Yeah. So it was things like that to where it just made it really difficult. So I had to access resources from the court, victims of crime. I had to let my local police department know what I was going through. That the school site, I had to let the school site know. I provided a picture of him and let them know that if he comes near this school, put an active restraining order that I had on file. Still had issues with with people who knew who he was, and he always put that smile on and very charming. So I had to go to a shelter, and that was because after so many attempts of trying to locate him and find him, keep in mind, I'm still trying to protect him. I'm still like, no, don't send him to jail. Don't send him to prison. He's a veteran the whole time. And, I had to go into a shelter because the police department was like, there's nothing that I can do to help you. You're about to lose your kids. So went into a shelter, and they actually helped me a lot. And I was just kind of went through transitional housing. So I appreciate everything everybody did, and is still doing for me, because I still access counseling resources and things like that. So I would say like your local domestic violence shelters are of great value because they actually link with the school system. And I'm questioning that today because of all this cutbacks, the executive orders that's been signed recently. I'm afraid that children are not going to get the help that they need, because that's always been a great tool. They work with law enforcement. Law enforcement knows to protect the school, which trickles down to the community that you live in, which everyone is supposed to have effective communication. A lot of times when people know these shelters are there, they will watch and make sure that it's safe. And if the school sites know that these children are coming from certain places that have legal representation, sometimes they do take them a tad bit more serious when it does come down to making sure that these children's best interest is in mind, because they have actually suffered a traumatic event, or maybe going through, sometimes children don't deal well with divorces either. So it doesn't have to be traumatic. It can just be the fact that separation anxiety, things like that, that the children may be suffering from, because this is new to them. It may be just new to them, and you don't realize how it's affecting the kids. So communication is always great. Teachers may see things. Counselors at the domestic violence shelter. I know I went to Pacific Lifeline was a big help, because I think when I went in there, my children were a little older, and they were able to express themselves in ways that I was not even aware of. The way that they express themselves through music and things like that, they allowed the kids to explore and be creative and own their feelings, in which I had such a hard time for so long owning my feelings, because I didn't want anyone to know what I was going through, that I didn't realize there was a burden that I was putting on my own children. And because I wasn't being responsible and accountable for what I was exposing them to. So I just thank God every day that they were there, because if they hadn't been there, and to actually know the tone of the community, that helped out a lot too, because I went to resources in LA County, but they weren't able to really help me, because I had been in San Bernadino County when all these things took place, to where San Bernardino County was able to jump in and to correct from the criminal justice system, to say, hey, these are the things that should be right. Even down to the reports, the police reports, they helped with that, to fix that, to make sure that certain things were included.
Yeah, that's critical, especially with financial abuse, because it often gets omitted from a police report.
Oh, yeah. The financial abuse is real, because, I was responsible for medical bills that I didn't know anything about. Like I said, a car came up stolen. You're talking about my front door got kicked down. Who was going to pay for all that? I was going to have to pay for all those things. So it just seems like every time we made progress, here it is, he came and he tried to destroy the foundation I was trying to build up, when he should have been with me, alongside me, helping me build. He's tearing it down. Yeah. And so definitely the financial abuse was real. You're talking about childcare. I had to switch childcare facilities, and I'm working 2 jobs. It's like between the one job and the second job, here it is, I got to pay someone to watch the kids out of my pocket, because I need to go into another contract in order to get the best rates. I was able to negotiate, well, you want all these kids, you're going to have to come down on the price. But every time something happened, or he knew where we were, or try to get close to someone, I had to pick the kids up and switch their locations, because I didn't want him praying outside. I was terrified of him because of what he was doing to me. Never wanted anyone else to be victims of his volatile behavior.
And you can get very used to the daily stress of being the person where all consequences fall, financially and otherwise. Just as equally, you can get very used to being the partner where things just don't tend to be mandatory. Contribute when you're working. If you're not working, you don't contribute. Well, you, Windi, don't have that option. You really can get used to that. If you have somebody that's unstable, even just unstable financially, you really can feel trafficked. Like you don't have the options of maybe going and doing something else. How did you move after your divorce from a place of, you went from victim to survivor and really were very, very smart to utilize a lot of resources, including therapy, to help you get through a recovery or start a recovery process. How did you move from that into being an advocate?
I've always been somewhat of an advocate just because of my church, my religious expectations. And one thing that I was taught, my children were taught, was to, you see somebody in the dark, you bring them to the light. And that's one thing that we've always done, always just been really great at doing out here, being a model for that, because we don't like to see people suffer. We don't like to see people sad or misunderstood. If there's anything that we can do to help someone clarify something, I've always just taught my kids to help acknowledging people. These all go back to my religious beliefs, whether it was extreme. I think some of what I was taught was kind of extremish because it kind of put me in a vulnerable situation now that I have to go back and rethink. What do they mean when they say these things in the Bible, the way things were interpreted to me? As a gun violence activist, after my husband and I got divorced, he was not providing much support still, but there was a lot of coping skills that my children and I had always used that was taught to us, and new skills that were developed through current counseling sessions and stuff like that, because I never wanted my children to be abusers. That's one thing that I just was so adamant about, because I felt so horrible for thinking that one day they can do this to someone. So I don't think I ever stopped.
That's incredible thinking, because, a lot of parents might not have thought of that. I mean, to have that foresight, this could continue the problem if they don't develop some new worldview.
Oh, yeah. I just never wanted to think that they would hit a woman, or I never wanted my daughters to feel like a man has the right to hit them. And I have to say that today I did an awesome job with the support and the resources that I had accessible. And I have to say that because I've heard stories of like girls slapping my son, and everybody was like, he did not even hit her back. He better not, he better not just talk to her again. Things happen, but I never want my sons to ever raise their hand at no woman. And I am so happy. I mean, that's joy to me. That's pure joy. My first daughter, my oldest daughter, she wound up coming in contact with a man that was trying to control her. And she got married, and her husband, I guess, tried to choke her or something to that extent. I don't know all the details, but she wound up leaving him. She left him, and he never saw her again. And
because you had the wisdom to pass on to your daughter.
Right. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I did what I did. And I teach parents today, you have to do damage control. You have to. There is no way that you can get out of an abusive relationship and think that your children that were exposed to that was not affected. They were affected. They were in the house. They learn how to communicate, how you guys have been examples. They learn all these things. And that was brought to my attention. Like I said, gaining access to resources was the best thing. But a lot of women don't want to do that. The opportunity is there, and they will not even do that. But I love my children too much to have not done that. I don't care if I have to do it again in another lifetime. I'm doing it for my kids because I want to make sure that they don't ever wind up being the abuser or the victim in a domestic violence situation, because they don't know how fast things can turn and people wind up dead. And so that's the reason why I went into advocacy, was because I was clearly aware that there needed to be more resources for everyone who's exposed. They think that it's just merely the one victim. No, everyone needs access to resources to undo the thoughts, to undo the memories and everything else. We're here in the natural, but yet it's something psychological that you can be in the same situation. And a lot of times people are just going to do what they're going to mimic what they saw. And not a lot of times what they were told they saw. And we have to be careful with that. Women have to get their kids counseling. And that is more reasons to leave an abusive partner than anything. If you have children, you cannot stay in that relationship, because it is teaching your children to be bullies. It's going to teach your child child to do other things, you will have problems with that child. That child will start defying authority because maybe that partner, the abuser, will start telling that child things, and that child can't really say what they feel. They want to protect the mom. Sometimes the abuser will start abusing the children. You don't know if it'll be mentally, physically, sexually, emotionally, but abuse is abuse. Financially, abuse is abuse. And so it's just extremely important. So yes, I did go into advocacy because I was a victim of gun violence in 2017. I felt that it was my responsibility to make sure that I share my son's story, just like somebody shared with me about domestic violence, that I shared my story about what happened with my son to others, to where we don't stay stuck in this cycle, that we know cause and effect, that we understand that we have choices out here, and the choices that we make sometimes have permanent consequences people are not ready for, especially with gun violence, because these young adults, they're not ready to do that time. They're not, but they don't really understand the consequences behind it. Why would you want to go somewhere where there's people been in there longer than you've been alive? If you're young, they're going to give you a date it out because they feel like there's an opportunity that you can make it out here. But for those who are older, their time is up. You know, you go in there for homicide at 60 years old, pretty much you know you're not coming out of there. They're not ready for this. They're not ready for this. You're going to a level 4 or a level 5 yard. You're not going somewhere where people get child support or, you know, driving without a license. You're going to a horrible place. So I had to just start speaking out. What I do is that I just make sure that there are resources on behalf of gun violence victims by telling my story to legislators that were able to assist with the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, how I was a traditional military family, how PTSD was in our household, that there wasn't a lot of resources that I had accessible, that it turned around and my son, who was helping kids who were homeless, wind up being a victim of homicide in St. Louis, Missouri, where a young man went and purchased a firearm 3 days prior on his 18th birthday and was given 600 bullets from AR-22 without a background and a permit. The first day he wind up receiving that gun, he wind up robbing somebody. From there, my son was deceased within 3 days in an apparent robbery because he was helping some kids who were homeless, and they knew he had rent money. It was the 27th of the month. My son, he owned a music business. He worked full time. He graduated high school with 64 college credits. He was going into the military, as most men do in our family, but he wanted to go in with more rank and more pay. And so he was going to complete his associate's degree before going in. And in the meantime, he wind up passing away on U.S. soil. It's just insane to just see what's going on today and how picky people are about who serves for this country, willing to give their life, but people are not even making it because of gun violence, you know, and it's juveniles are the ones that are at risk. The young man who was the shooter actually had a football scholarship. He had never been in trouble a day in his life. I spoke to him directly because the young man who purchased the gun gave his gun to somebody else and drove him around because he was taller and bigger. He was 6 feet tall. He was a football star. So no one was going to fight with him. And then he had this rifle in his hand. So I talked to the young man who shot my son and told him that I forgive him and that I love him and that God loves us all and that I forgive him because I can't judge him any more than he can judge me. I felt that there was a lot of things that I could have taught my son. There's things that I just feel like it would have been a teachable moment for my son if he had survived. But since he wasn't there, I took the opportunity to be a mother for the child that needed me at that time.
How extraordinary. And you've also created a legacy for your son and bringing awareness regarding gun violence advocacy.
Based on our stories and my son's story and the fact that I was a domestic violence survivor, I just wanted to make sure that people understood exactly what type of danger that we're actually in.
And it takes an extraordinary person like you and other survivors to speak out. But what is your tip for someone who is under financial abuse or another form, any other form of domestic violence in a relationship but hasn't yet decided to change the situation?
Well, one thing that I would suggest, and it's kind of scary because people don't want to think about, but you have to think how blessed you are to be here. Because there are so many people who are no longer here that did not get a chance. There are people who left and they found them. And they were getting ready to start their life over and never got an opportunity to start their life over. We need to know that every day that's given to us, we can change something. It's given to us for a reason. And with that being said, to think about how many close calls you've had in order to make sure that when you leave, that you want to make sure that you already counted your chickens. You already counted how many blessings, how many lives out of those 9 lives, because it'd be one of those times you may not be able to escape death like you've been able to escape all these years of this time. And to make a plan. Sometimes your closest relatives are not the ones that you want to tell them where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
You make a plan, and the plan has to be internal. It cannot be anything external, because look at me, my car got stolen, and they can find you. So you have to be willing to leave everything behind. You have to be willing to do that. Just like we just had fires here in LA. People had to escape. The house was burning down. They would have stayed in it. They would have perished with the house, and they left. And that was enough for them to start over. And so now they have to make this decision. Okay, where do I want to start over? It's like an emergency management plan, like I mentioned, to mitigate, to prepare, response, and recover. You got to have a solid plan. Seeking resources from domestic violence shelters are the best thing ever, because they know what you're getting ready to go through. They understand, and they're prepared for it. You go to a family member's house, they can talk to a neighbor outside. They know where you're at. Dropping your kids off at school. They can go into their school and take that child. There's no court order. So just having a plan and just going into a domestic violence shelter, I would say to call around, see what your resources are. Try to get a separate phone if you guys are on the same phone plan, because he can be tracking your location. Anything that you feel like he can track, you make sure that you leave it there, because you have to mean business, and you cannot come back, because every time you come back, he's going to punish you. You can't even use your credit. So you want to talk about financial abuse. Even though you leave, you can't use your credit if you're married. He can track you. So it's a matter of humbling yourself and just knowing that today is the day, and you have to make that decision. And when you leave, you cannot look back.
That's a really great point, Windi, is that pride can keep us in those situations as well. What will the neighbors think? What will my family think if I admit that I've been putting a veneer over this absolutely horrible relationship and making the decision to basically come clean about it? What is your tip for someone who is newly out of an abusive partnership but doesn't know what to do next?
Go back to school. Find something that you want to do in your life. Something that you've never been able to do, and do it. It will keep you busy. It will help you with creativity. It will put you around like-minded individuals. And a lot of times, things that we enjoy doing, we learn so much about ourselves through our career.
That's so true. That's so true.
It is. It really is. I mean, it's just so much that we just learn. And so we just have to start replacing those bad memories with something that's good. Start keeping yourself busy. So going back to school, taking an additional class, I would say would be the best thing to do. It would give you the ability to kind of say, okay, I can make it. It makes you look towards the future. Because if you're just leaving with what you're leaving with, sometimes you just feel like, gosh, I'm at a loss. I don't have this. I don't have that. But as long as you're working on the future, it keeps hope alive.
Even taking an online course and looking at the future with a new pair of eyes, because you've really only been looking through these tiny little slits for so many years. Everything's been dictated by circumstances or by the relationship that you're in. This has really been a terrific conversation. You have so much wisdom to offer.
Thank you.
And I'm so happy that you're out there as an advocate, not just for gun violence and for advocating for a better future for kids after your own tragic situation, but also for domestic violence survivors everywhere, and that you are a voice of wisdom. And I hope you do keep speaking out.
Find me, Pray for the Prey, PRAY, the number 4, PREY 827.
It's just an honor to hear what you've been doing with advocacy, both in the world of domestic violence and with gun advocacy. And I'm going to post all your links below. You folks can contact her if you have questions, want more information about gun violence advocacy, and also for domestic violence. Thank you again, Windi.
Thank you for having me.
And you've been listening to Speaking Out on Financial Abuse. Hope to see you again soon.